Hello everyone and welcome to my Magicka Templar build, PvE DPS for Dragonbones DLC. Now Magicka Templar is often kind of regarded as one of the weaker classes, but I want to show you that this is not necessarily true. They do have some merits being run in a trials group, and it actually perform fairly well as a ranged DPS. Now, for starters, why do people think Magplar is bad? Well, in reality, it actually competes with Magicka Sorcerer. It might even hit a little harder than Magicka Sorcerer in terms of single target, but it is somewhat outclassed by Magicka Nightblade in terms of single target and Magicka Sorcerer for AoE damage. With that in mind, it kind of falls into a Jack of Trades but King of None role. However, there's a few things that this class can really do. For one, Backlash, which morphs to Purifying Light, will expand and copy damage taken from a target. With your whole group hitting, this can actually do a lot of damage, not to mention we also can give our group Minor Sorcery, which is a nice buff actually. It's 5% more damage. And while Templars can cast this by healers, not many of them necessarily use Dawn's Wrath abilities. We have a bunch of them. This will be up a lot, pretty much all the time. So, it's a good choice if you like Templar's playstyle. It is a full light attack rotation. It has a strong execute. It's a solid class. Don't underestimate it too much. It actually does hit some pretty high numbers. And if your group is more concerned about single target than AoE, you could even bring this over a Magicka Sorcerer. In this video, I'm going to show you the race, Mundus food, buff, potions, skills, gear, all that stuff, rotation. So let's get right into it. In terms of gear, now, Templars, like Nightblades, have a passive that gives them 10% more critical damage done. Therefore, Mechanical Acuity is an incredibly solid choice to use. We run 5 Acuity on the body, and 5 Master Architect. Master Architect is with jewelry and 2 body pieces. We also run an Asylum's Perfected Inferno Staff. If you're imperfected, it's not really a big deal. We can actually squeeze 3 Force Pulses into rotations, so you can still get the same uptime more or less. It's not a huge deal. Maybe a slight DPS loss, but it's pretty easy to get this staff. Not the perfected, but at least some version of it. The Maelstroms is slightly harder to get. We need this. Double Inferno does do more damage. If your group is lacking shock damage or you want some more AoE, you could run a lightning staff here, but I would strongly recommend Inferno. Poisons, these do a lot of damage. I think they're very strong. You could use this. You don't have to. It's optional. They are quite expensive. In terms of skills, Force Pulse is our main spammable. It's very strong with the Asylum Staff, and because Templar lacks any sort of class spammable, we need to use this. Jesus Beam, aka Radiant Oppression. This is a strong execute. It should be stronger, and it probably will be next patch, but it still hits very hard. And the more magic we have, the more damage it will do. I'd honestly say that I'm not much of a Magicka Templar player. If I was better at holding my Magicka to execute, I could probably get another K or 2 in terms of DPS than I have usually getting. Vampire's Bane. This is a very strong dot. You could use the other morph, Reflective Light, to get more damage, AoE-wise, but this is pretty good too. I would say this is probably stronger single target. If you want more AoE, go for Reflective Light. Channeled Focus. We need this. Not only does it give us Major Ward and such, but we also get more magic while standing in it. This is really important for sustain. Inner Light. This is somewhat of a flex spot, but you do want this. It gives you more Magicka and spell crit. I would say keep this on here. Empowering Sweep. This is how we use Master Architect. With 72 ultimate, we can have at least 46% uptime on Major Slayer. Decently strong ulti, but it's really good for Master Architect. It does out damage the Burning Spell combo without this. Even if you were to not run Master Architect, you still want this here for this passive. Increases your critical damage with an Aegis Spear. We don't have an Aegis Spear ability without this. It needs to be on the front bar, regardless of Architect or not. On the back bar, we have Blockade of Fire. As with almost every Magicka build, we have some form of Elemental Blockade. It gives us a buff with Maelstrom, but it's also a ton of damage in its own right. It's one of our strongest abilities. Blazing Spear. Fairly strong dot. What's nice is actually the synergy too. You can get almost 4k mag or stand back, which is nice for an ally. So Keep this up, it's still a pretty strong dot. Elemental Drain, we use this on a target dummy, sometimes in VMA. Otherwise, you would use Harness Magicka. I had Dampen here for PvP, but use Harness in PvE. Purifying Light, this is actually a pretty strong dot. Keep this up, it copies the damage. It's important to have a pretty high uptime on this. Higher parses will have higher uptimes on this. Rearming Trap, if you decide to go melee, which you have to anyway sometimes to use Empower and Sweep, just like with Magicka Nightblade, you can use this too. If, on the other hand, you are purely ranged, you would put Inner Light here, and you would swap Master Architect for Burning Spellweave. You could still run Acuity though. I would say it's better to try to have a hybrid range DPS build with this and Nightblade. But if you wish, you can run a full range build, and if you have to in some fights, like an AA for the mage, then run Spellweave as your alternative setup, and disregarding Trap for Inner Light. I do think Rearming Trap is worth the slot over Inner Light if you're going to go hybrid, because it will give you Minor Force. It's a decent dot on its own, but the Minor Force is what we really want. It gives us 10% more critical damage, coupled with our passive, and Mechanical Acuity, we're having some very strong crits. Destruction Ultimate. Now, we don't need this for Ancient Knowledge, but it is really strong AoE, and we want this to start the fight with it too. Okay, we'll go over champion points. In the blue tree, we have 48 in the Atronach, Force Pulse, and a bunch of other stuff. We have some decent Master at Arms to use with direct damage. 52 Thaumaturge, Blockade is one of your strongest abilities, as is Purifying Light, as is Vampire's Bane. Keep this pretty high. You could do a little less here and perhaps put someone to Staff Expert, but I found it's a little more damage to keep this at 52. 61 Elfborn, we're running Mechanical Acuity, so we want our crits to be as strong as possible, plus Rearming Trap, plus our passive. Very strong, keep a lot into Elfborn. Elemental Expert, we have a bunch of elemental damage, a lot here. 30 Spell Erosion, you could put maybe 1 point here at max. You could also reduce this, so it could perhaps be 25 and put some other into Staff Expert, Master at Arms, Elemental, whatever you want. I do think 30 is a solid number though. In the green tree, we have a little bit of tenacity in case we need a heavy attack. Mostly Arcanist though, because we're going to be trying to do a light attack rotation. Warlord is another priority. I'm not putting the rest in here because it's your preference. You can have whatever you want, and the rest of these, it's up to you. The red tree is the same thing. These 3 are priority, and these 2 are priority. Adjust them as needed and as your preference. Okay. Now, in terms of rotation, Magicka Templar has a pretty standard rotation. It's fairly easy. It's not too hard. When you start the fight, put down Focus. You need this up all the time. This will give you Magicka back. Start the fight with it. Make sure it does not fall off. Keep up Elemental Drain if you're by yourself. Healers will do it for you otherwise. To start the fight, you drink a potion. Light Attack Blockade. Light Attack Blazing Spear. Light Attack Purifying. If you have Trap, Light Attack Rearming Trap. Then switch. Light Attack this, which is Vampire's Bane. Keep this up every 12 seconds. Force Pulse, Light Attack, Force Pulse. And then repeat. Now, sometimes if you have some downtime, you can squeeze in 3 Force Pulses, but 2 is usually better so the dots don't fall off. I'll repeat this again. Light Attack Blockade, Light Attack Spear, Light Attack this, Purifying, Trap, Ulti if you have it, Vampire's Bane, Force Pulse, swap, repeat. You don't have to reapply Vampire's Bane every rotation. I'm just doing that to show you what you want to keep up. Okay. As you can see, we got Age of Spear's sweep back pretty fast. This is how we keep Master Architect up. It is quite strong. Mechanical Q would make things stronger as well. Okay. Mundus Stone, use the Lover when you're alone, just like almost every DPS class. In VMA, this is the best choice. Sometimes even in 4-man dungeons, this is better in case you're losing pen. You might not have an optimized group, you could still use this too. If you're in an optimized trial group, use the Apprentice, otherwise Lover for solo content. Buff food, Witch Mothers, this is a necessity. We cannot sustain with blue food, it's not possible. Use this, the health is kind of a drag, but it is worth it in the end. Not to mention, if you find yourself having trouble sustaining on the dummy, in a trial scenario you can sustain much, much better. I wouldn't worry about it too much. We use spell power potions. The crit you don't necessarily need if you are having double inner light. So if you only want to craft using 2 reagents, you could do that. But if you're buying from the guild store, this is what you're going to get anyway. So blue food again, we don't use that. We have a flame enchantment here. You could run shock if you're solo often. It's not the worst idea, but we also are a dark elf, so flame damage will give us more. You could also be a high elf with this build, and then shock might be the better choice. But in general, dark elf will give you about 1k more DPS than a high elf with this build. We're infused with weapon damage here if you don't want to run poisons. This is pretty nice too. It's pretty negligible. They're both pretty close. I think poison slightly out damages this, but they're close. I'm going to show you a combat parse to show you where the damage comes from and what you need to keep up most of all. Sorry about this. Okay. So, with Magicka Templar, 37.7. This may seem sort of low, but again, I don't play Magicka Templar on live. This is purely on the PTS. You could definitely hit much higher than this. One thing I always struggle with, radiant destruction should be more like up here, but I'm not so great with it. In execute, it's best to have as much magic as possible, so if you need to do one heavy attack to get a bit more back, do so. If I had more Magicka at the end, instead of wasting too much on pointless dots like Blaze and Spear, this would have gave me a whole K more damage. I would have been 38.8 or almost 39. So in reality, this build could hit 40k very easily. I just am not perfect rotation. If you are a better Magicka Templar, you are going to hit 39 to 40k. I'm not even joking about that. As you can see, we had 45% Major Slayer uptime. That's pretty good. It actually could get up to 50 usually, but I, again, messed this parse up pretty bad. Berserker enchant. I suppose poisons ran out too. This whole parse was pretty imperfect, but even with a lot of mess-ups, we were nearly 38k. So you can see, with the correct parse and a better player at Magicka Templar, this could easily have been 40k DPS. This build is mostly to show you the skills, the gear, the rotation. You are the one to get the damage. I don't play this on live. This is better for you guys. Ultimately, that's about it. Play around with this class. It actually is a whole lot of fun. It also gets a really sexy ultimate execute sound. It looks really cool. I mean, what else gets to be a choir boy but this class? It's still a very strong class. If people are trying to kick you from a trial for playing it, tell them to shut up, because this actually is a very strong class in its own right. You could also run a melee setup as a final wording, but I actually do think the range does more damage with the Asylum staff. But if you wanted to go full melee, you'd run Puncturing Sweep instead of Force Pulse. Everything else remains the same. And on a last note, next patch, Magicka Templar is going to be very strong. One of the best ranged and melee setups in the game next patch. So if you want to level 1 for this patch and get used to it, I wouldn't blame you. I personally am going to take advantage of this anniversary buff and level one of these bad boys up. I think this could easily be one of my favorite classes in the next patch. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Go out there and use Magicka Templar. It does a lot of damage. See you next time. Goodbye.